Hey guys, it's Megan. So I realized it's been a while since I've done a good book rant. And so since one of the books I was trying to read recently brought up some things I want to talk about, I figured it was time for a new one. Now, full disclosure, this rant is not going to be quite as ranty as when I went off on the book, The Death of an Artist, a while back. So if you want like a really good rant, you can go back in my IGTV and look at when I talked about the book, The Death of an Artist. This one's not going to be quite as ranty, but I still have some things to say. So if you have been paying attention to what I've been reading lately, which I share here and I share on my blogs, you'll notice I have not been reading a ton of business-specific books lately. I've been reading lots and lots of things about art, about capitalism, about politics, but I haven't done a ton of like really true what I would consider business book reading. And so I decided last month that it was time to kind of just go back in and maybe read some business books. So I started out by diving into this book, The Soul of an Entrepreneur, which I talked about on my blog, actually talked about on both blogs. And this is not the book I'm going to rant about today. I actually really loved this book. I was a big fan of David Sacks's last book, The Revenge of Analog. If you are feeling like kind of business advice is not for you, particularly like things that are aimed at startups and people that are VC funded or companies that are VC funded, this is just a really nice book. It's not a how-to. It's really kind of about like the why people become entrepreneurs. So this was a business book I read and I was like, cool, I'm diving back into the business book genre. I'm really excited. So then I decided to pick up this book, How I Built This by Guy Raz. So from my understanding, this is based off of his podcast. Full disclosure, I have never listened to the podcast. I'm going to let you guys know like a super secret here. I am actually not a big podcast listener. It is just not my jam. I would much rather read a book. Personal preference, nothing against podcasts. Love people who love them, love people who make them. It is just not my preferred way to consume information. I want to read a book. So I was like, cool, a book distilling all the stuff on his podcast. I'm down, I'm going to get into that. Perfect way to kind of, again, dive back into some more business book reading. Gonna be honest with you guys, I couldn't get very far on this. Two things right off the bat that stopped me, and that led me to wanting to make this video and rant a little bit. So the first one I'm not really gonna spend too much time on, but the first one is that it dives into how, businesses follow the arc of the hero's journey. Don't super love that. Yes, the hero's journey is a useful storytelling tool. Do I think it's the only useful storytelling tool? No. Do I think that you can distill every business story down to it? Maybe in retrospect, but I feel like when you're in the business journey, hearing like the hero's journey is how people build their businesses isn't actually helpful when you're like in the muck trying to figure stuff out and you're like, well, what if my business isn't like a triumphant hero's tale? It's just like a slog and a grind, right? So it makes us feel like, this is why I don't love the idea of like putting all business narratives into the hero's journey, because it makes us feel like if our business isn't following that trajectory of like heading towards this epic battle and then returning triumphant, like if our business doesn't follow that model, then we're doing something wrong. Fuck no. No, like business looks a lot of different ways. So that was my first thing, but I was like, okay, I can ignore that. I get it. He's a podcaster. He's a storyteller. I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt. So I dive into the first chapter, and the first chapter is ostensibly about ideas. I'm like, okay, cool, I get it. Like you need an idea to start your business. Makes sense. Then I get to this part. The intersection of personal passion and problem solving is where good ideas are born and lasting businesses are built. Nope, I'm out. Because here is the deal. If you guys have read my blog, I am so over problem-solving marketing. But beyond that, what really like makes me mad about this is this idea that like every business has to solve a problem and that all business advice is unilaterally across the board applied to everyone, particularly artists and makers. Because here is the thing, and this is really like what it comes down to and why this book frustrated me and why I think for a lot of artists and makers trying to read business books frustrates them, is that not all business advice applies to artists and makers. Now, I want to be clear about something. When I say not all business advice applies to artists and makers, it's not because I think that like artists and makers are special and we're like exempt from the business world. It's not that. I don't think that we are, I mean, I do think we're special, but I don't think we're special in terms of like the rules of business don't apply to us special. That's not what I'm talking about here. And I also don't think that artists and makers are exempt from certain kinds of business advice because we're bad at business, because I don't believe that also. If I believed that, I wouldn't do what I do, which is teaching artists and makers how to be better at business. Because at the end of the day, I believe that business is a learnable skill. And I think that artists and makers actually have a lot of things that they can bring to business. We are creative, we are quick thinkers, we have a lot that we can bring. So none of those are the reason that I think that business advice not all business advice applies to artists and makers. The reason that I think that it's problematic to give out really general business advice, like your business needs to solve a problem, is because the reason that people buy art and craft is different. It is not the reason that someone buys, say, information or a service, right? We don't buy art and craft to solve our problems. We just don't. Like, come at me about it, because I truly believe that. Like, no one goes to a craft show looking to have their problems solved. And to think that every person on the planet makes every purchasing decision in order to solve a problem is just such a reductive way of looking at the world. Like, yes, there are plenty of successful businesses that solve problems. And if you created something and brought it into the world to solve a problem, that is awesome. Good for you. But if you are an artist or a maker and you are like, every time I hear the advice that my art needs to solve a problem, it sends me into like a shame spiral, you are not alone. The reason it sends you into a shame spiral is because it's bad advice. It is just not how people buy art. It is not why people buy craft. And so, yes, artists and makers need to understand basic business principles, but when you say things like, what you do needs to solve a problem, and that's the path to success in business, that's just not true. And also, you can look at plenty of non-art and craft related businesses that don't solve problems and that make people a lot of money, right? Like professional sports, great example, right? What the hell problem does watching a football game solve for you? It doesn't, right? It doesn't. But professional football makes a lot of people a lot of money, right? Doesn't solve a problem. It doesn't. And so this idea that like every business needs to solve a problem is just not good advice. And so when you start out and you try to say like, these are the basic principles of business and one of them is that everything needs to solve a problem. No, that is the basic principle of a very specific kind of business. It's the kind of business that's going to get you funded on Shark Tank potentially, right? Like you solve a problem, it solves a problem for enough people. Yeah, then the sharks are probably going to give you money for it. But it is not the reason that everyone purchases everything. Because also, what kind of boring world would that be, right? Like if we were like, I must solve problems all the time. It makes us feel like robots, right? Sometimes we want beauty. Sometimes we want to laugh. Sometimes we want to be entertained. There are so many things that motivate people to make purchasing decisions that have nothing, like zero to do with solving a fucking problem. And don't give me that, well, like, okay, well, you buy a movie to solve the problem of what to do for 2 hours. No, that's not solving a problem, right? Like that's just to reduce everything to problem solving is so frustrating to me. And so this is why I think like part of the reason that I have strayed away from reading business books is because when I read them, then I get annoyed because this stuff is like, you must do this. These are such specific principles and they just don't apply to every type of business, and they really don't all apply to artist and maker type businesses. And honestly, this is why I started my membership program, Artists and Profit Makers. I just got so tired of artists and makers hearing advice and feeling like they had to follow it to the letter of the law. And not only was it bad advice for artists and makers, like it was stressing them out, it was making them feel bad, whether that's again, like thinking you have to figure out what problem your work solves, or feeling like you have to have a lead magnet for your email list, or that your emails need to be useful content. Yeah, If you are selling information, if you're selling online classes, yeah, your emails should probably be useful content. But if you're an artist or maker, your emails should help you sell shit. You should be like, here's my pretty thing. Here's my awesome thing. Go buy it. That's what your emails should look like. I know because I run that type of business. I've been doing this for a long time, and I see it work in the people that I work with. I see it work in the members of Artists and Profit Makers as well. So this is the thing, is like, I started Artists and Profit Makers because I got so frustrated with artists and makers getting stuck in this advice that just doesn't apply to us. And again, it's not because we're special. I think we're special, but it's not because we're special in terms of the world of business. It's because the reasons people buy art and craft are different. And that's a good thing, right? Like, it's actually a good thing that the way to run an art and maker business is not the same as the way to run a sports empire or an information business or to become a successful musician, right? Like, I have a hard time believing that any business person is an expert on every kind of business. Actually, I think this is really the core of my rant. It just took me like 6 minutes to get here, right? Like, I get it. You can be good at business, and there are general business principles that it's helpful to know for everyone. But at the end of the day, being good at a certain kind of business does not automatically make you qualified to teach every other type of business. And it doesn't make you automatically an expert in all types of business. It just doesn't. And I actually think this is one of the business world's like greatest fallacies, right? Like, if you know how to run one type of business, cool, you know how to run them all. But I don't think that's true, because like, there's also not one right path to success. And this is true even amongst artists and makers, right? This is something that I'm also so passionate about and something I really work on inside Artists and Profit Makers, is I'm not trying to give people one path to success, because I don't think there is one, right? Your business has to reflect what you make. It has to reflect your personality. It has to reflect your life constraints, all of those things. And so there's not even one right way to run an art or handmade or maker business. So there's sure as shit not one right way to run every type of business. There just isn't. So if you as an artist and maker are trying to read like general business advice books or listen to general business podcasts or all of those things, and it makes you just feel bad or shitty or like you're not doing it right, just stop. Because not all of that advice applies to you. And I promise you, like, trying to fit into that advice is actually then doing it not wrong, but that's what's causing you frustration, right? You're trying to listen to advice of someone who, A, has never run an art or handmade business, but also B, doesn't really understand the psychology of why someone buys art. If you have someone telling you that if your art or your craft doesn't solve a problem, well, then that's why your marketing sucks. No, that is wrong. Your marketing then sucks because you are trying to sell people art and craft in a way that does not resonate with them. You are trying to sell them art or craft by hitting the rational part of their brain and not the emotional part of their brain. That's what you have to tap into, right? Emotion. That is why we buy art. That is why we listen to music. That is why we watch movies. That is why we go, when we could, to sporting events, or why we watch sports on TV, right? Not everything is about a problem. Sometimes it's about tapping into the emotion of your customer. And so this is what I really want you to think about. When you hear general business advice, it's okay to ask, does this apply to me as an artist or maker? Because it might not. Now, certain things like, you gotta pay taxes. Yeah, that applies to you, but not everything, not every piece of business advice applies to us as an artist and maker. And ultimately, that is why I started Artists and Profit Makers, my online mentorship and my online community, because I wanted a space that was just for us, right? So if you are tired of wading through generic general business advice and feeling like this doesn't apply to me, or if I don't do it like this, I must be doing it wrong. No, stop. Please come join me. Come join us in Artists and Profit Makers. There are over 30, there are like tons and tons of trainings to help you. They are very specific to artists and maker businesses. There's a wonderful community of artists and makers that are there. And most importantly, and I really want to emphasize this because I know that there are a lot of membership communities out there that are just like, you join and the person who's in charge of them, you never see them. That is not true with Artists and Profit Makers. This is really an online mentorship program. I am in there every day, at least Monday through Friday, in the forums, coaching, answering questions, giving feedback, helping people with really specific stuff for your business. That is what I do. That is why I built this program. It is not like you on your own figuring shit out. It is me in there with you in the trenches, giving you feedback and giving you advice. And so again, if you are looking for business advice that's really specific to artists and makers, that doesn't make you feel like shit when you can't follow it or when it doesn't seem to work or apply to your business, I invite you to head to artistsandprofitmakers.com, check out the community, check out the membership site. And if you have any questions about the program, leave a comment, ask me. I'm happy to answer them. You know, I've been running this for almost 3 years now. I created this as really like a safe space online for artists and makers to learn about business, to explore and to figure out how to make this work, because at the end of the day, I want artists and makers to be successful. And it's not by following generic business advice. It's by really figuring out why people buy art and craft and understanding what it is that's amazing about your work and then putting it out in the world over and over and over again. So if that sounds interesting to you at all, head to artistsandprofitmakers.com to join, and I will see you in the next video.